Welcome to the first of what we hope will be many episodes of a new New Zealand film podcast called Real Time. We're going to talk about films in general at the cinemas and hopefully have a little bit of perspective on New Zealand content. I'm Robbie McGregor. Joining with me, always as Garth, is Ryan McMahon. Hi Ryan, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad.
It's pretty crazy. We've been talking about doing this for a couple of years, I think, and have never got off our butts to do it. And we just thought maybe this is the time. I tried looking online and see how many other kind of film podcasts there were locally. There was one run by Dan Slevin down in Wellington who used to do a lot of film stuff, and he works for Radio New Zealand, and he seems to have stopped. So I was quite surprised at that. I didn't keep up with it. I started listening to it, and so I thought maybe we can fill the gap. I have no idea. Maybe we'll have like one person listening to this, and maybe we're lucky and we'll have lots more. But it's the first attempt, so we'll see how it goes.
If you're listening to us, welcome. If you like us, keep listening.
Exactly.
If you don't like us, I guess send us feedback.
Yeah,
what we can improve on.
Tell us what we're doing wrong. I think maybe I didn't even think about saying this to Ryan beforehand, but now I'm thinking about it. Maybe just give a little bit of background of what our backgrounds are and our interest in film. Personally, I'm pretty eclectic and watch pretty much anything. And I kind of grew up watching a lot of cinema because of my mum. Ryan, your background, like what got you into film? I actually don't think I've ever asked you this.
I think my background was more during high school, I think. Like, I used to watch a lot of movies, as you do as a kid when you grow up, but I don't even think there was anything that really triggered me. It was just at high school, I was like, yeah, I want to get interested in film, and so my careers teacher at school sent me to South Seas in 2006 for a trial course, and then after school finished, I was like, I don't want to go into another year of schooling, which foolishly I should have done. But I've graduated South Seas in 2017 now.
So it took you 11 years.
Yeah, 11 years to finally get there and actually get more invested in what happens with films and the background of it.
And now for your job, you spend a lot of time watching films and television.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of
sports, yeah.
And sports as well. So it's kind of funny in a way. I did film school in 2003, and I've been working mostly in the television industry. But I still keep my passion for film, and anyone obviously who knows me knows that I will spend countless hours talking random crap about films. So me doing this on here seems like just a natural progression, really. And I think Ryan and I spend a lot of time talking about it. And as I said, we kind of have been talking about doing this for a couple of years. And so, yeah, I thought that would be a good start. I guess what we're trying to do is create a format. We haven't really... I've kind of loosely put up some notes, and Ryan and I have discussed it. So we're thinking that basically a rundown... We'll go through some recent events and news and stuff and things just from a perspective, and try and look at some maybe more of a local spin. We'll talk about some of the stuff that's happening locally often as well, and so there's a bunch of summer festivals, so I think we'll kind of maybe talk about that, and then we'll talk about a couple of recent films, kind of as a reviewy kind of segment that we've both seen recently, and we'll try and do that. Like, I guess we're trying to do this every couple of weeks maybe, and hopefully that means it'll just be a consistent kind of, we've got information. Maybe only one of us has seen the film, but that's kind of still good because the other person can ask questions. But for this time anyway, we've both seen both the films we want to talk about. And then we'll probably spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of old films that we've seen recently, or just something that we really like, that we have in common or not in common in some cases, is something that we can suggest to each other to watch. And then we're kind of thinking about maybe coming up with a couple of fun segments, but we'll talk some more about that later on. I guess we should start with some of the news. I wanted to touch on the fact that against all odds, people seem to be enjoying Aquaman.
Yeah, I think when you get the likes of the DC characters, they haven't had the best run of cinema films as of late. But if you get a DC character on their own, the movies tend to do pretty well. I mean, if you take the Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy and then Wonder Woman, they've both, come out on their own, but you put them in like Justice League or Batman vs Superman, and people just don't like them at all.
See, this is the thing though, is it a problem of like teaming them up in the way it's been written? I mean, you can have your team ups that can be, you look at the Marvel ones obviously, and the team ups can be reasonably good or reasonably bad, but they seem to generally work. But I mean, obviously, I haven't seen Aquaman, so but obviously talking to everyone who has, they've said it kind of just revels in its ridiculousness, like it's cheese to the entertainment degree, and maybe that's just it. It's about being suitable for your character, and I think maybe that's the one thing that the Marvel films have always gotten right, that DC's kind of finally learned. It's not about the shared universe, it's about making sure the characters seem fitting to what's their environment. It's kind of a weird one. I thought it would do okay, but it's doing just as good as Wonder Woman, and if not, it's slowly climbing to like $1 billion worldwide, and it might quite get there at this rate. It seems to be doing really, really well. It's one of those things. The comic book industry in itself is changed so much in the last decade, and I honestly remember going and seeing, I don't know, Spider-Man and X-Men and all that, and I would never have thought at any stage that they would become the most dominant blockbusters of the time. It's kind of a strange thing. I mean, Ryan, you've also grown up on a lot of comic book elements and so forth. Did you think that might be the case as well? Like, do you think that you would ever see an Aquaman film? I mean, aside from the entourage jokes that everyone knows about, did you think you'd ever see this happening?
No, like I think with the likes of Aquaman and like going back to Aquaman and Wonder Woman, just no pun intended, blowing it out of the water. But I think when the likes of X-Men and Spider-Man came out in the early 2000s, like no one expected this. They're just like, oh yeah, they're pretty decent comic book movies, but now they've just, they've grabbed a hold of the world and they're just making buckloads of money.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I remember the first Spider-Man coming out and breaking blockbuster records and everyone going, wow, this is incredible. Like, nobody ever thought a Spider-Man film was ever going to do this. Like, I mean, Batman had been reasonably successful, Superman had been reasonably successful, but there'd been that real dark period as far as people were concerned in the late 90s, and just the fact that any studio really had the attempt to try and do a justification on an actual comic book and succeed was impressive at the time. But the fact that it's gone on to do what it has, I mean, Aquaman as well, like, as a character, not the easiest sell, you'd have to admit. Like, it's not a guy who swims and talks to fish and has a trident, and
how do you sell that?
Exactly, it's not an easy sell. I mean, maybe in some ways because of the Justice League flopping, but him being he was probably the most consistent character in that film. Like, to be fair, like, he was pretty over the top, pretty ridiculous, and I think if they've latched onto that, then that makes complete sense. The year coming up in comic book films, I mean, the last year's been amazing. Like Black Panther, Avengers, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then obviously the Aquaman. Like, I'm probably even forgetting other ones. Those are the big ones of the year. And this year's got Captain Marvel, and there's another X-Men movie which has been pushed back so many times. And obviously there was a pushback for Wonder Woman. The Wonder Woman sequel was gone to 2020. Do we think that maybe that's a reaction to the glut of superhero movies, or is it literally DC, Warner Brothers saying we need to get out of the way of all the Marvel juggernaut this year because it's going to be a big year for them? It seems kind of unusual. Like, any ideas? Any thoughts?
I think it's definitely got something to do with Marvel, but maybe they probably want to look at what they've got so far, and if they want to do potential reshoots to maybe add something more in, or they think that it may not garner towards one part of the audience, so they might want to cut something out, maybe.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, maybe also coming off the back of Aquaman, they'll think about what they're wanting to double down on. Maybe it's also to do with thinking about the bigger picture about what they actually want to do, seeing as they're not really planning. It doesn't sound like they're planning on going back to the Justice League thing. It doesn't sound like Ben Affleck or Henry Cavill's they're returning, and but that's unknown. I mean, they could turn around all of a sudden and announce something, but
there's rumours back and forth of whether yes they are leaving, no they're not leaving.
Yeah,
they don't know what they're doing.
It's definitely very an unusual circumstance, but it's kind of I'm still flabbergasted when I think about it. I never expected to see this sort of how mainstream these comic book films have really become, and how they're just constantly. I mean, at their worst, I mean, Ant-Man and the Wasp was still 600 million worldwide or something, 700 million worldwide, which is by Marvel standards is getting like average. When you're making close to $1 billion or over $1 billion per movie for some of these big ones. I mean, I hate to think what Avengers is Endgame's going to end up being at, because the anticipation for that film is going to be through the roof, and as long as it delivers, it's going to have legs, and it's going to be an insane year, I think.
It's especially with like Avengers Endgame, like there was rumors and speculation of when the first trailer would drop, and I was reading online that there was just lots of people saying there's so much anticipation behind it, they don't necessarily need to drop a trailer because people would go see it anyway.
Yeah, I literally could have been a title card, I think, and people would have been like with a date, and people would have been like, all right, I'm going to see it, or a single shot, and even the trailer that did release, if they literally just had the scene of Tony Stark as it is, and then the title, I think people still would have been like, wow, what a trailer. Like, they didn't need to see everything else. It was just enough to be like a tease. I totally agree. I totally agree with that.
And then was it like a week later they released the IMAX trailer for it as well, which gave like an extra 20% on the sides.
Oh yeah.
So it sort of confirmed what some people thought was happening within the trailer as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's probably worth me mentioning at this point, and I'm trying to increase my cinema attendance this year because the last few years have been pretty lackluster. I only go to kind of some very big events, but I'm trying to this year to see at least one movie every week in cinemas for the entire year. So at least a minimum of 52 movies, which sounds at this point, being 1 weekend, pretty daunting. But I think it's doable. But there's definitely tent poles or event films, and there's definitely stuff coming up that I'm looking forward to. I think I'll come back to that because I was going to say we should probably discuss some of the things coming out later on in the year, kind of preview what we're looking forward to. I wanted to also touch on one other thing which is really bugging me a little bit, and it's to do with the Disney live action films. I'm not convinced about Aladdin. I'm not convinced about Dumbo. I'm not convinced about The Lion King, and I don't understand. I mean, yeah, they've been successful. Don't get me wrong. But I don't understand the need to revisit all these and turn them into some quasi live action because, as we've previously discussed, Lion King isn't really live action.
No, I wouldn't count it as live action as such if everything's still being recreated. I mean, to me, live action remake would be the likes of Beauty and the Beast, where you've still got human characters who are actually alive, hence live action. So to call the likes of The Lion King live action is kind of a cop-out, I feel. Like, yes, they look photoreal, but it's still an animated film.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read an article just recently and it was talking about the qualifications of what we can class as animated, because some, obviously, big blockbuster films, even at their, you got an actors in it, a lot of the action sequences are completely CG. Even when you've got a actor in the scene, it's usually not the actor, it's a CG body double with a scanned actor face on it, and, it's not really... it's not really live action either. And then it starts to get into this weird place where, like Lion King is going to be a different type of animated film than, say, other animated films, but it's still not live action. I'm not convinced by the look of Dumbo either. Like, I've seen the trailer and I'm like, I'm not sure. And then they released the photos for the Aladdin movie, and I don't know. Again, it could be alright. I mean, I'm not meaning to be so pessimistic about it, but it just seems so, like, much like the superhero movies, there's just so many of them coming out in a big kind of glut, and I'd feel like there's going to be some failures. They can't all be successful, I guess, but you never know. Maybe I'm wrong, and the audiences will lap it up. I know The Lion King's going to do amazing. I think that's the thing that we can be pretty certain of. There's just so much nostalgia for the original movie that even if it wasn't that good, the first week of it's probably going to be massive. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's easily in the top 3 movies of the year.
Yeah, I reckon there'd still be a lot of people go out to definitely see The Lion King for sure. Maybe not so much Dumbo or Aladdin, but Lion King for sure, just because it holds like a special place in so many people's hearts. Like, they grew up on it.
Yeah,
I mean, myself included.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, I wasn't a massive Lion King kid, but I think it was an age thing. I think for me, the year before there'd been Jurassic Park, and that was pretty spectacular as a film, and animated films just didn't cut it for me anymore. Like, maybe if I hadn't seen Jurassic Park when it first came out, and so for me, the realism of CG was just so impressive and so awe-inspiring that looking at an animated film. I mean, Aladdin was out at the same time as Jurassic Park was here in New Zealand, and I remember seeing both pretty much more or less a couple of weeks apart. I'm glad I saw Aladdin first because, I mean, it was the older of the two films, but yeah, it's kind of one of those things where maybe I'm just not, maybe that's part of it. Maybe the nostalgia for me isn't as strong as other people, and that's why people are getting very excited. I wanted to also say, and I think you would agree with this, we were talking about the voice cast for the new version, and it sounds fine. There's no one really questionable in there, but the one thing I didn't quite understand was if they're going to keep James Earl Jones as Mufasa, why they haven't kept Jeremy Irons as Scar. It just seems unusual. Is he that more iconic? Like, I always thought that both of them played off each other very, very well.
For me, like, when, of course, we've seen the trailer so far. Like, when I first saw the trailer, yes, I knew that James Earl Jones was the voice of Mufasa, but to me, it kind of sounded like Neil deGrasse Tyson a little, like just in the start of it, and then I was like, oh no, it is James Earl Jones. But yeah,
do you think, regardless, excluding recent sexual harassment allegations, do you think that Disney might have considered casting someone like him in replacement?
Not necessarily, but just someone of a similar sort of tonal voice.
Well, is this like the replacing Rowan Atkinson with John Oliver kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, on that aspect, I think John Oliver's actually a good fit for it.
Oh, I agree. It's not one of those ones I question, and it's because I think you can easily see as a tonal replacement, it's still the same outcome. And whereas I don't see who I've forgotten who's playing Scar. This is the worst part of it. I was about to say
I can't remember myself.
But that's the thing. I don't recall reading the name and going, oh yes, I can hear that as an equivalent replacement for someone like Jeremy Irons. It was just this. Okay, they're going a different way, and they're kind of going down a particular path. Are you looking up what the...
It's Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Oh, okay.
Is Scar.
A Scar, okay. So, not a bad choice. There's nothing wrong with that choice. But if you're going to keep... You should... The consistency should be to replace all the cast or keep as many of the ones that are most iconic to me. That's my personal opinion. But, but anyway, I don't know. I'll change to Dumbo as well, just for the same fact. I do like Tim Burton. I think as a filmmaker, he's pretty impressive. But he has his good films and he has his really weird films, and Dumbo to me looks like it might be one of his really weird films. I don't think it's going to be... I think it'll do fine. I don't think it's going to be a massive success.
Yeah, well, I've seen nothing about it, so I don't have much to add to it. Like, I haven't even seen the trailer or anything.
Oh, you'll have to sit down at some point.
Just looking through it here, it does seem to have Michael Keaton and Danny DeVito back together again with Tim Burton, and
yes,
of course they were with him on Batman as well.
They're both in the trailer. It is a solid cast. It's period piece. It's very Tim Burton kind of tonal. It feels like they've definitely said, "Hey, you put your stamp on it." People are going pretty crazy because there's obviously the hallucinogenic sequence in the original. Have you seen? You haven't seen the original either, so you don't even know what I'm talking about.
No, I've missed out on a lot of the Disney films, apart from Lion King.
Wow. It's pretty crazy, and if Tim Burton, it might turn into a almost Willy Wonka-esque thing. That's my concern. Like when I talk about it, it could either go really really good, or it could just turn into a big Willy Wonka thing. At least Johnny Depp's not in it, hey.
Yeah, well, that's a bonus. Creepy Johnny Depp.
Creepy Johnny Depp being some sort of thing. Maybe he's got a cameo, who knows. I just thought it would also touch on some of the stuff coming up. I just saw a trailer, as I was going before, we're both of us are looking forward to. I've just brought up a list of stuff that I'm potentially interested in. I don't know if you've got anything that you're thinking about. You're probably looking at my thing right now.
Yeah.
But I saw a trailer for Happy Death Day to You, which might be one of aside from Glass, which I'm also looking forward to in a couple of weeks, probably one of my most anticipated sequels this year, which is something I never thought I would say, because the original, if Ryan hasn't seen it, I know you haven't seen it, have you? No. The original it seemed like it was just going to be a generic horror movie, and it's that mixed with like Groundhog Day, And I thought, oh, well, that sounds really cliche. And I can't even remember why I ended up seeing it. I think it was just because there was nothing else to watch at the particular time I was at the cinema or whatever it was. And I ended up enjoying it. It was amazing. It was a real funny movie, really good blast. And the sequel basically allows the characters to go back to the same point in the original film and continue, even though they think they'd beaten this problem, which I never thought I'd see in a movie. I thought that was kind of ridiculous, but the trailer looks absurd. Like, I think obviously the first one to two where they can just kind of ramp up the budget, ramp up everything else. So I'm really looking forward to that. Ryan, what are some of the things you're looking forward to this year? Is there anything in particular?
You mentioned Glass. I definitely think for me that's one of the, to say it's a non-comic book film when it kind of is and isn't in a way because it features that. But for me, I think that's going to be one of my anticipated films for the year to look forward to. I think so many people were unexpectedly saw Split. They're like, oh wait, there's a universe now.
Yeah, definitely.
With Unbreakable.
I as you know, and I'll talk about it on here. I was at the movie marathon and they played Split at the movie marathon, and nobody really knew what they were going to see until the title came up. And even then, only a few people, including myself, kind of had any vague idea. Only reason I knew about it was like literally the week before the marathon, I'd seen a poster for it, and I had no expectations. I knew who the director was, and I knew James McAvoy was in it. That's all I knew. So it was a pleasant surprise that it was a reasonably good movie, and then the extra kicker of it actually being part of this Unbreakable universe, I guess is probably the easiest way to talk about it, was just a nice little, amazing kind of little end piece. So it's definitely something I'm really looking forward to. I'm just going to go through a couple of other movies maybe that you and I might be interested in for this year, or that might be of interest. There's the long time coming Alita Battle Angel, which James Cameron's been trying to make for a very long time.
They had a stand for that at Armageddon last year as well.
They did.
Got a girl with the photo.
Photo
with the girl.
Girl with the photo. The girl with the photo.
That's the one.
So yeah, no, that was supposed to come out at the end of last year, and it's been pushed back to February, I think it is. Hopefully it's not pushed back again. Obviously Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame. There's the How to Train Your Dragon sequel, which just opened this week. There's a remake of Pet Sematary. There's Shazam. That was the other comic book movie. I was trying to remember there was something else to see from DC. That could be very interesting. The third John Wick, the second Lego movie, obviously. The Elton John quasi biopic, but more of a fantasy thing, Rocket Man. The X-Men thing, Dark Phoenix. There's Toy Story 4, of course. Another Spider-Man, obviously, I forgot about that too. Second It. And obviously at the very end of the year, Star Wars Episode 9. So it's going to be a very interesting year as far as mainstream films go. It's a very big year.
And I think if you look through most of that list too, like most of them, Disney have their finger on as well. So they've definitely become a big conglomerate in the film industry now.
Well, especially now that they own Fox. I mean, it's going to change the focus.
Yeah.
This year, I think Disney's ended up with about like almost a third of all box office, something close to that, which is just insane. Like when you think about it, like I never would have expected that. I'm going to touch on one last thing because it's going to segue a little bit neatly into what I wanted to talk about locally, which is Mortal Engines. You haven't seen Mortal Engines, have you?
No, I haven't even read the books.
You haven't
even. I haven't read since I was like in high school.
Read more books, Ryan. Read more books.
School kids read books.
I went and saw Mortal Engines. Visually, really, really good. But I can definitely see why it hasn't been doing very well. It's very generic, and it's such a shame that I saw Christian Rivers' short film that he did, and it was really good. And he definitely has a talent for directing. I don't know. Is it because it's involved with Peter Jackson and him and Fran wrote the script, and they just had a heavy hand in it? Or was it just not the right thing? I totally agree with a lot of comments that if this film had come out like maybe 15 years ago, it probably would have been okay. But it really pushes the generic kind of plot. I'm trying to bring up a thing to talk about, but it's kind of funny because it's the first screening at the open air cinema, and I think it'll probably be the most empty unless people don't know what they're getting in for.
Definitely people that didn't really see it in the first place, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll go along, have a
Exactly.
picnic, and
Well, the difference
see
is
how it turns out.
with the open air one, sorry, Ryan, with the open air one, you kind of got to pay for it, which is the difference. So I don't know. I'll go through the open air cinema, and then I'll go through some of the others. So the open air cinema is the one you have to pay for, as I just said, and that's in Western Springs. They're screening Mortal Engines on the 17th, Bumblebee on the 18th, the new Grinch, on the 19th, the Crimes of Grindelwald. Now, again, something else I don't think is done particularly that well. That's on the 20th. Free Solo on the 22nd. That's a really good film. I managed to see this a while back. It's about this guy. He literally is crazy. He free climbs El Capitan in the Yosemite National Park, and it's just incredible. It's definitely worth seeing. I would definitely recommend that out of it. A Star is Born, the fourth version of A Star is Born, the one that's doing very, very well with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. That's the one. Bradley Cooper's the director. Probably a good chance of an award winner this season. Bohemian Rhapsody, which also you and I have both seen, are very, very good.
It's very good.
Second Act with Jennifer Lopez on the 25th. Another screening of Star is Born and Mortal Engines on the 26th and 27th. Vice on the 29th, which I kind of really wanted to see, but now I'm not 100% sure I want to. The Hate You Give on the 30th, Bohemian Rhapsody again on the 31st, Instant Family on the 1st of Feb, Wreck-It Ralph 2, Ralph Breaks the Internet on the 2nd, Second again on the 3rd, The Favourite on the 5th, Holmes and Watson, which has been absolutely slammed.
It's been slaughtered, yeah. Was it like 0% on Rotten Tomatoes?
It was at one point. I think it's a little bit above that now. It was so bad. There was a story that came out the other day that Sony knew how bad it was. They tried to sell it to Netflix, and Netflix said no. So
not surprised.
It's thing. Aquaman on the 7th of Feb. Instant Family again on the 8th. Mary Poppins Returns on the 9th. Wreck-It Ralph 2 again on the 10th. The Mountain Film on Tour Festival on the 12th. Aquaman again on the 13th. The Breaker Uppers on the 14th. Aquaman on the 15th. How to Train Your Dragon on the 16th, and Mary, Queen of Scots is the last movie on the 17th of Feb. That's at the open air one that you have to pay for. It's in Western Springs. Silo Park has a series of movies. I really like Silo Park. I really think the atmosphere down there is really good, and I love the seating. I just don't like the fact that there's that stairwell in front of the silo and that it makes the screen so much more. But there's a bunch of movies screening there. You were talking about this the other night, I think.
Yeah.
The Incredibles 2 is, well, it's probably, by the time I get this out, it's probably going to be on because it's the 4th. It's on tonight. Black Panther on the 11th. Isle of Dogs on the 18th. Whale Rider on the 25th. Blues Brothers on the 1st. So I got a classic there. Solo, a Star Wars story on the 8th. Princess Bride for Valentine's Day on February 14th. Jurassic Park, an old classic there on the 15th. Shoplifters on the 22nd, and that's their entire season of films. They've got other events on, obviously, down there. They have arts and culture and stuff. And then finally, the Auckland Council does its movies and parks, which we've been to quite a few of those too, I think, haven't we, Ryan?
Yeah, the past couple of years, yeah.
They've got a top secret special on the 25th. It doesn't obviously give me any clue whatsoever. So it's Smallfoot on the 1st. They're in different locations too, so kind of like all over the place. It's probably better to go to the website to have a look. The Greatest Showman, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Ocean's 8, La La Land, Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, Pitch Perfect 3, Grease, Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, Incredibles 2, Hunt for the Wilder People, Despicable Me 3, Ferdinand, Incredibles 2 again, Peter Rabbit, Paddington 2 twice in a row, Back to the Future 2, Solo
3
again, Christopher Robin, The Boss Baby, Solo again, Jumanji again, Ferdinand again, Peter Rabbit again. So there isn't as many movies this year because I've actually got quite a few repeats. They usually try and avoid too many repeats last time, but oops. That was kind of that's a bit of a change. I really enjoy the fact that there's so many options over the summer to go and see some outdoor movies, as long as the weather plays ball, which it generally does. It's really good. My usual problem is shift work.
Yeah, same for me.
And same for you, yes, yeah. That we don't normally get to enjoy as much. But I'd say most of those will be pretty packed, especially the free ones. It's always really good to take the kids and have a good and same. There's food always on location, and usually most places there's not too much problems parking wise. Even with Silo, it's usually not too bad parking down at the harbour, the waterfront area. I guess we've kind of covered everything. Is there anything else you want to talk about news-wise I've completely forgotten about?
That I can think of.
That's come across in your mind.
Just go off with like the Silo Park and all that. I think there's definitely like food and all that there, but you still see people with picnics, and
Oh, yeah,
they pre-pack
definitely.
stuff, especially with the other free cinema as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Throughout the city.
Definitely the case. It's a very it's always very nice down there.
Yeah,
So.
like I don't think there's any restrictions that you can't take your own food. It's just
No. Oh, Silo's still sell. They even have alcohol on site. They've got a liquor license for the thing. They've got a little bottle stand so people can drink down there as well, which is nice. They've got a license for the area as long as you don't walk outside of the zone.
Yeah. And if you go along too, you get a nice little collectible cup as well. Like you can get collectible cups you can go back and keep reusing.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's really cool. That's a really, really cool idea, actually. It makes sense. It's better than having lots of plastic waste and stuff around the area. I guess we should move on and talk a little bit about the movies that we've seen recently that are the big releases over the kind of this Christmas period. As we both talked about, we both haven't seen Aquaman. Well, you haven't seen Aquaman. I think I said I haven't seen Aquaman. Sorry, I just naturally assumed you hadn't seen it. But you hadn't, so that's all right. No. But both of us have seen Bumblebee, not at the same time, and both of us though did go and see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse yesterday. So I thought maybe we'd start and talk about Bumblebee. I'll start simply because I want to make the statement before you get the chance to.
Yeah.
It's pretty telling when your first 3 minutes of the film is better than the 5 films preceding it. Would you agree?
I definitely would have to agree with that. I mean, when I first saw the first Transformers movie, I was like, yeah, these are okay. It kind of makes me feel like a kid again. But the first 3 minutes of Bumblebee, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely a kid again. It's just so good.
It was ridiculous. I was just like, oh my god, look, it's the generation form, that the G1 form. That's what I was excited about first. And then I was like, oh, it's that one, and it's that one, and it's that one, and just like constantly like, oh my god, this is so amazing, and like, it just works. I mean, I kind of had this understanding that the movie is not flawless. It's not perfect. It's not great. And I've made the same comments that lots of other people said, which is that basically in a lot of ways it's just the Iron Giant with Transformers, which is fine. There's actually nothing wrong with it. It actually tells the story well. It's funny. It's clever. It's well time set period wise. It makes self-referential jokes that actually land. The cast is solid. The action's actually followable and understandable. It's just a solid movie, which was a surprise considering, I don't think anyone had the expectations. And I think that's what's kind of killed its box office a little bit. Everyone's like, oh god, the last Transformers movies were so bad. I'm not even going to bother with Bumblebee.
For sure. I definitely think that's hindered a little bit, but I think word slowly got out that Bumblebee is actually good, so people are still flocking to it.
I hope so. I really do, because I think that it deserves some legs, because I'd rather see more of those films than go back to Michael Bay's kind of style. It's exactly I agree with you. If this had been the first Transformers film, like if I hadn't seen the Michael Bay ones and gone, oh, this is okay or whatever, if this had been the first Transformers, I would have been excited about a franchise based on this.
For me, I think I definitely saw the first one in the cinemas, but I can't remember whether I saw the others or not. I think I saw 2 and 3.
I definitely...
The others I just waited till DVD, and I haven't even seen the last night, so that's kind of saying something.
I wouldn't even bother. You've seen Bumblebee now. I definitely remember seeing the second one, and it's like, I think it lost... When it wasn't exactly like I was enthralled, and I think... I remember the thing that's telling about the second one is I actually remember that I came out of that movie screening and a whole bunch of us got text messages saying Michael Jackson had died. That's more of a memory that I have about that movie than the movie itself. That's a really telling sign. I'm pretty sure that was it was the second one. But I remember, like, is it the second one? There's a girl and she actually is a robot and he's at college.
Yes.
Oh god,
yeah,
it's so bad.
Because Megan Fox it's her last one. She's only in the first 2.
Yeah.
So that is that one.
Yeah, it's really bad. I don't know if it's the worst in the series because it's hard to agree. It's become a big blurry mess. Anyway, but Bumblebee by comparison, oh my god, what a comeback! So if you haven't seen that and it's still in cinemas, I highly recommend going and seeing it. At least for the sake that you want to be able to see more of those films. If you even care about Transformers, if you don't care about Transformers, then I wouldn't even bother going and seeing it because, to be quite honest, it's not going to convince you any better than the Michael Bay films. But if you kind of liked the Michael Bay thing, I don't know what to say to you. You're disturbed.
Bumblebee's better.
Bumblebee's way better. I wanted to start this conversation because you brought this up the other day, and I think it's worth talking about. As far as what it fits timeline-wise, is it still a continuity of the Michael Bay films, or is it its own original thing? Now, my question about that is that I don't think any of the Michael Bay films really stayed consistent with themselves to begin with. So not being consistent isn't anything new. But you had some thoughts, Ryan. You were telling me the other day about this.
Yeah, I saw a video last night as well of just like, what the ending of Bumblebee meant, which didn't actually explain anything. But apart from the fact that it kind of said it's continuous of the other movies, but it's not. But it just throws the whole timeline out. And the video even mentioned that the previous movies themselves have even just contradicted what the previous movie had said too. So if it is in the same universe, okay, but I think for itself it should stand as a reboot. Even what is it, Lorenzo de la Bonaventura?
Yeah,
that's it. It's a hard name.
It is. It's not an easy name.
It's like you with Chiwetel Ejiofor. Yeah, but I digress. He's even come out and saying that if Bumblebee does do so well, they do have a potential sequel in the works, and where a sequel can go for them, and what they want to do.
That's good. My only question about this, because I kind of would be like, yeah, it makes sense making its own continuity and new timeline, is if that's the case, then they didn't even need. The whole thing was they had to try to stay consistent to the Michael Bay aesthetic stylization of the Transformers, and that the way they transform and the way that they look. But outside the G1 forms that they were able to take at the early parts, when they're actually in robot form, they kind of look more akin to their Michael Bay counterparts. If that's a reboot, they didn't even need to do that. And I maybe it's a marketing thing, maybe it's a confusing thing. If they started making them look different, everyone would have been like, well, what's this? But it just seems weird. You might as well, if you're going to go whole hog on it, might as well at this point. I think it's pretty obvious you're not going to continue the Michael Bay. But there's other references in the. This is the other thing though. There's sort of the references. You brought one up as well to the characters in the other films. Yeah, it's not simple. It's not simple.
Yeah, well, there's a character. If you haven't seen the movie, there's a character in it that John Cena plays, Agent Burns, I think. Yeah, Agent Burns. And there's a younger character comes in running to him with some information that he addresses as Simmons.
Yeah,
and I think that's supposed to be like a little Easter egg towards John Turturro's character from the Michael Bay films of Agent Simmons from Sector 7.
Of course, yeah. So it's supposed to be maybe a younger version of him in the 80s.
Potentially, yeah. But see, now with the whole timeline, it's like, okay, is it just a coincidental name, or is it supposed to be?
We're touching on this because we haven't really gone into specifics, but there's a very specific part of previous Michael Bay lore where the Transformers were on Earth during various wars, and yet they don't turn up until the 80s in this, so it's inconsistent. It can't be the same ones, but it can't not be the same ones, because that would be just kind of both ways would be stupid. It's a weird thing. I don't think we should really get bogged down in it, but it is kind of hard to kind of go, is this a reboot or not?
Because it's supposed to be the same sort of timeline, but one thing I definitely think would be a huge cop-out is if they turn around and make like Bumblebee 2 or whatever, and they go, oh no, this isn't the Optimus Prime from the first Transformers movie, it's a predecessor Optimus Prime.
That makes no sense.
Which would just be a complete cop-out to me.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
Yeah, they'll probably come out, if they went down that road, they'll probably come out and go, oh, he's passed the leadership of Matrix down, or whatever. It'd be a huge cop-out.
It would be. It would just make way more sense just to make its own thing.
Absolutely.
Just the easiest answer is just go, right, this is its own continuity and timeline. It's not like that doesn't exist in the Transformers universe anyway.
Yeah. I just don't think any of them know what continuity means.
Maybe they're trying with this one. We should give them a bit of the doubt that they understand that the Michael Bay films have not been. There's been pretty much little to no continuity in them. Yeah, it's a very odd situation. But anyway, final thoughts. You enjoyed the film, Mike?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, there's just so much in it, like Easter eggs for like fans of the original cartoon series, and even the movie. For a certain point in the movie, the original theme song is played just momentarily, which is a nice little nod as well.
From the movie, yeah, of course, yes, yeah, it was nice. There's lots of other little gags, and the jokes all pretty much land. I had a good laugh. I think you had the same experience as me as well, that maybe there's some of the jokes that are specifically for people who know what the hell the references, and you're like the only one laughing in the cinema.
For sure.
Or like you and one other person. There was me and one other person that I was sitting beside that came along to the movie with me, and we both looked at each other, and when gags had come out, just be like, that's brilliant, and everyone else in the cinema was like, what the hell are these two on? Like, probably.
Yeah, they're on something.
They're on something. I guess the next thing we want to talk about is what we went and saw last night, which was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I'll let you start because I started on Bumblebee, so it seems fair enough that you start talking about it first.
Yeah, I think story-wise, I really enjoyed it. It was a good take on Spider-Man, and definitely one that you probably wouldn't... Well, I don't know. You probably wouldn't be able to do as such with live action, but you probably could if you gave it a try. But
it wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, something about the animation, like I really enjoyed. Like I liked it that it had a real comic book sort of feel. So it was like you're watching a live action, but an animated comic book. I think one thing that really drew it away from me was like the background and sometimes the foreground made it look like you needed 3D glasses on. I don't know if you picked up on that.
Yeah, it was the color spectrum, but it was also it's the same color spectrum that you have in the Spider-Man outfit, which is the kind of red and blue. Like I that was part of the enhancement in it distortion and so forth, chromatic kind of style. I ran the gauntlet of animation styles. I think that was the thing that was really impressive. Like cohesively as a design, it's amazing. It's very unique. There's moments where you've got cityscapes that look almost photoreal, blended down to the point where you've got cartoony characters in the middle of the mix. It's every animation style under the sun. Yeah, it's cohesively put together in a very unique, original style. I don't think you'd ever seen anything like it. I don't think I'll be surprised unless they might make a sequel, but there probably won't be many other movies like it ever made because of it's very unique, and it's because of its stylization and elements. Characters are slightly exaggerated, but they're still human enough. Like it's very unusual. It's
I think I remember hearing you mention that all the backgrounds are like potentially matte painting, which you'd be right in saying that. Well, they do look like that.
It was because we went and saw it with one of our flatmates, and she was like, "What's matte paintings about?" And I was like, "Oh, it's the backgrounds. You create matte paintings." She's like, "Oh, is that like a new thing?" And I was like, "No, it's completely opposite. It's actually one of the oldest technologies you could have as far as making portraits. But in animated films, it's very important to making kind of these, something in the background that's a lot more static, but." These days, everything's so heavily animated, it's not very common to see matte paintings, but because you're obviously wanting to create comic book panels come to life, sometimes having some static image in the back actually adds to that value. So it's very interesting. There was a colour laboratory, kind of a colour specialist or something she also read in the credits. I was like, I have no idea what that one is. That one's a new one to me. I'm sure it has to do with all the colour elements that we were talking about. The thing I think it blew me away is I really didn't know. I remember hearing about the movie and going, oh gosh, it's Sony trying to cash in on their license still.
Yeah, on the last of their licensing
or whatever they can salvage. I mean, to be fair, we didn't even talk about Venom actually earlier on in the comic book movies, but that's made a lot of money too. Made more than it probably should have. It's just, I really didn't think I was going to enjoy it. I didn't think it was going to be very good. I'm pleasantly surprised to say that I'm completely wrong, and it was absolutely stunning, and just the story was very... The story was really... it wasn't even a generic... Like comic books, you almost want to say it's a generic story, but even for a comic book, it wasn't that cliche. Like,
no.
It kind of zagged when you expect it to zig, and zigged when you expect it to zag. It was kind of really weird like that, actually. But in a good way. The voice cast was amazing. Like, every single character was just perfectly cast. God, Nicolas Cage was even amazing. Like that's like not to say that Nicolas Cage can't be a good actor. We know he can be a good actor and he wants to be, but I think that's it. It's literally he loves comic books. So give him a choice of being able to do a voice in this. He went whole hog on it, and he obviously relished it because he's actually good. He's charming and funny and clever, just like everyone else is clever and charming and funny. And it's got a very heartfelt centre to it, and yeah, I'm not going to spoil the last bit after the credits, but I will talk about it. Obviously, there's a setup for a sequel with, was it Spider-Man 2099?
Yeah, whatever that one is, yeah.
Yeah.
A potential spoiler, not spoiler, setup if it does do well.
Yeah, and I would say I'd be surprised if it hasn't done amazingly better than expected. I don't know. I mean, I think it was Phil Lord went to this after after he kicked off Solo. Or he was already working on this, but he had obviously working on the story with someone else and being involved. He's obviously thought out his character lore. It's exactly like the Lego movie. He knows what he's talking about with the character backgrounds and making sure that works. But there still seems to be an emotional core. And maybe I should never have doubted it with him. I mean, considering the sorts of broad comedy and reference and stuff he can do. Yeah, I don't know. It was definitely a very unique film. That's all I can say, and definitely worth seeing.
Yeah, one thing I was kind of surprised about is that when it first starts off and you sort of see it in the trailer, is that it shows you Spider-Man and it references the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans as well as him being Peter Parker, which, and then later on it shows you an older Peter Parker, which I kind of thought would be good to maybe be the Andrew Garfield one, but I know a lot of people didn't like those films compared to the Tobey Maguires.
I think they were just touchstones. I don't think it was supposed to be those characters, but it could have easily been those characters. I do remember reading an article where at one point they thought about casting Maguire in one of the voice roles, just specifically for that reason. But then kind of shied away from it just for the obviousness. But it's definitely because it's its own thing. Like, it's referential to the lore, like it making jokes about the fact that it's like, you know, one more time from the top. Yeah, you kind of like, it's explaining it jokes with the audience on the idea that by now you should know the origin of Spider-Man, which I think is clever. It's not one of those just self-referential jokes for the purpose of it, because it plays really well into the plot every time it gets reused. Especially when it becomes that shorthand joke when the other three turn up and they're all like, they literally like their thing is like 20 seconds of that, and then they're like, oh yeah, that's it. It's a short story. So yeah, like a 20-second gag is like, it was boiled down because we'd had it so many times. It was kind of fun. It worked. It was funny.
Yeah, it still kind of worked instead of being overdone, and you're just like, it's that same joke
again. Yeah,
like if they did that like for like 30 seconds for each person.
Oh yeah, it'd just be,
it probably would have just diluted down, but for the last three that showed up to have them interspliced, it was kind of good. And it worked.
Exactly. And there's some other really good gags. I love the bit where and obviously it was definitely an audience pleaser when he tries to make the leap and he goes up the building, and you have the dramatic music and then it cuts to him walking back down the stairs. That was really good. I really enjoyed that. That was a really good gag. Yeah. And then he ends up going up the smaller building.
Yeah. He's just like, no, it's too much of a leap.
There's too much of a leap. I'll go with a slightly less high one. That was pretty good. Like there's just like, it's a subversion of what you expect. It was which I guess I shouldn't be that surprised considering, you know, who was in charge of writing it.
Yeah.
Because I want to say that's his MO really.
Yeah.
I love his movies. He did Jump Street, Lego Movie, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, he definitely knows the lore and he knows how to write for it.
And subvert what you expect. It's like the car chase in Jump Street where that you expect they're waiting for the vehicles to blow up and they never do, and then all of a sudden the chicken truck explodes for no reason. Like the most unlikely of vehicles is the one that blows up for no reason. It definitely played well to its strengths. It was, and I definitely recommend it. It's a very high bar to start the year with. For the movie that good. If I'm going to be watching so many movies this year, I think especially at the cinemas, I think that's a really high bar to cross. But that's good. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. So yeah, both of us, you recommend it?
Yeah, I'd definitely recommend it for sure.
Yeah, I definitely would too. It's definitely worth seeing. I guess I don't even know what's coming out in the next couple of weeks. Glass is probably the next thing that both of us are wanting to see. That comes out on the 17th. Maybe we'll sit down and do another one of these just before you're going away on holiday for a week or so. Already? Jeez.
Yeah, I know.
I had enough of this already. So maybe we'll sit down after we've both seen Glass, and that'll be the next thing we have time to talk about as far as the full kind of cinema experience. I think it's this point where we want to talk about some older movies just for the sake of having something else to talk about. If people are still listening.
Yeah. If you're still here, thank you.
If you're still here, thank you for listening to us ramble, especially me, because I think I've been talking way too much. You picked out something off my DVD shelf the other night.
Yeah, Starship Troopers. Like, I kept meaning to say it to my girlfriend, like, it's like, we should watch this. I think she'd really enjoy it. And I think in the end she did really enjoy it. Like, she was a bit freaked out because there's bugs and giant spiders and that. But
I think she was more taken aback by the gore level. Like, all of a sudden some dude would lose his head and she was like, ah.
Yeah, I think that freaked her out more. But I think overall she still enjoyed it. But I still rate it as one of my earliest films that I saw to be, you know, as a good film.
I hadn't seen it in a long time. I think both of us talked about this a little bit at the time. It's just like, the visual effects hold up really well. It's one of those 90s movies that still... There's some ropey CGI here and there, but think the fact that and you're going to make the joke, I know you will. You make the reference if you want, but Phil Tippett's Digital Studios.
Yeah. Damn it, Phil.
Damn it, Phil. There was raptors in the kitchen, Phil. The fact that the animation was so solid for its time, I mean, it kind of makes up for a little bit of the more not so good CG. But the fact it's got this quirky aesthetic towards the satire with the military complex and all that sort of stuff kind of lends itself to the kind of comic booky, I want to say almost comic booky amount, because it is quite over the top. It's surprising. You think, Verhoeven, who directed it, did RoboCop, and it's definitely a companion piece. Definitely, if you wanted to put those two together as a screening, you wouldn't be doing a bad thing. It's so cheesy, but it's so good because it's so cheesy. The little interstitial commercial things just set up the universe so well, and it's pretty well acted. Even Casper Van Dien, he's known as being this cheeseball soap opera style actor, but he's pitch perfectly cast for that role. Like you couldn't have put a more better person in to be the main character. What's the line that everyone references?
I can't even remember.
Buenos Aires. I say, kill them all.
That's right.
It's so ridiculous. It's oh, it's so ridiculous.
And then himself as well, like he references it towards the end of the movie when they've sort of won the war for now, and then it's like before it goes to the credits, it's just like, is it when he's finally promoted or whatever, and they go back to war, he's like, "You want to live forever? I say kill them all," or something to that effect. It's just something like similar, same vein.
I mean, that was. I mean, I remember reading, or it must have been the audio commentary years ago, or reading something, and Vernhoven was talking about the fact that the whole point of having these good-looking actors in it is the absurdity of like the nicest-looking people going to war, and it's just very clever. Like, it's definitely, I don't know if it's, would you say it's underrated? I don't know if it's underrated.
I'd say it's just teetering on the underrated, just normal rated sort of scale. So it's not under or over. It's just
kind of
slightly under the middle ground.
People kind of know about it, but they don't probably think of it as highly as they should. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. It's a weird one. I think touching on it, we have to talk about the sequels and spin-offs a bit. The sequels are, as far as I'm aware, I know the third one's slightly better than the second one as far as I've been aware, but the second one is just terrible. But it had no budget. I mean, it reuses stuff from the first film, CG and so
much
forth.
The armor and all the
it uses props
shots and stuff,
and the CG itself is reused, and they just put some weird hazy smoke effects all over it and stuff. Yeah. It's kind of weird.
It's almost like a bottle episode without being a bottle episode. It's just half a dozen characters in one movie. Location. Yeah, bottle movie. Yeah, it's just half a dozen characters in one location, not really going anywhere for 90 minutes.
It's a weird series. There's the cartoon Roughnecks.
Yeah, Roughnecks as well. Although, I think the only continuity that has is maybe Rico is the leader of the Roughnecks.
Rico's Roughnecks, yeah. Legacy, here we go. 4 sequels, which include 2 live-action films, Hero of the Federation and Marauder, and 2 animated films, Invasion and Trader of Mars. And then there was the spin-off Roughnecks Starship Trooper Chronicles, which only ran for 1 season and ended on an unresolved cliffhanger.
Oh, that's a shame.
So it's I got bogged down in reading. I wish Verhoeven had made more films like those 2. That's the thing that I think I walked away with, especially after watching it. I was like, I would have easily watched another movie where he kind of took, like, there's this level of kind of satire of some sort of enforcement or fascism or militaristic action, or I mean, RoboCop is still a very good film for the same reasons. I mean, and this is probably the reason why another version of Starship Troopers probably would never work, is the same reason the RoboCop reboot didn't really work. That's not a fair comment, actually, because I think if the RoboCop reboot had been in the same vein as the original, it probably would have been fine. It's just the fact they tried to make it PG and change the tone.
Absolutely.
And it's a very straightforward action film in a lot of ways. I don't know. what we were talking about, I'm trying to think of a couple of things. I'm just going to change the subject, but I think a couple of things I need to think about. You need to sit down and watch Happy Death Day, because we talked about this earlier. But I want to bring this back because of reference stuff. You still haven't seen Ready Player One either, have you?
No, I haven't. No.
So you need to sit down and see that. So that maybe next time, before you go away, I'll sit down one evening and watch it. I don't mind watching it again. I've seen it 2 or 3 times. And sit down and watch it with you, because I think you'll, being who you are, and being your self, pop culture reference heavy, self, you will probably sit there and need to watch it more than once. I'll play it once, and you'll be like, oh, I need to go back and rewatch that because I missed this and this. Or did I see that, or did I not see that? Oh, I heard this was in it. I'm not going to talk about it, and you don't need to say it by word, but do you know the big thing that's in the middle of the movie? Like, has someone spoiled that for you?
Not as far as I'm aware. Like, I know of there's small Easter eggs.
Cool. There's a big set
characters
piece.
And stuff.
There's a big set piece that when I saw it, I had no idea, because I saw it at the movies. I had no idea it was in it, and I was like, wow, that's cool. So the fact that you don't know, well, hopefully don't know, is really good. That's obviously not a really old film, but I'm just thinking of stuff, the fact that it references so many other old films. We need to work out what we're going to watch next time, I think. Like, I'm going to sit down and pick something out that's very old. I watched recently, I'm pretty sure I've seen it before, but I don't remember seeing it. It was Spielberg's 1941. And You've probably never seen it? No.
I'd never even heard of it until you told me.
Oh, wow, you'd never heard of it. Okay, so that's even worse. I can see why, like, at the time, there was a bunch of... The infamous story is, like, I think he gave the script to some real famous actors. This included, like, John Wayne and, like, a whole bunch of people still around in the late 70s. And they all read it and went, you shouldn't be doing this movie. Like, this is... You're taking the piss out of warfare, and it's not good. Like, people sacrifice their lives for this, and you're just making fun of it. And he didn't get it. He plowed on ahead with the movie. The movie came out, and it was a big bomb. As far as Spielberg's career was concerned, it was pretty big at the time, especially. And he then obviously went on to make, like, Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, and now I think he's got these comments where he's just like, yeah, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. If I, now knowing what I know, I probably should have never made that film. It's just a ridiculous kind of spoof of warfare and war films with, like, this crazy cast, and it's a series of misadventures. Like, the fact is, the opening scene, and I'm going to spoil this even though you haven't seen it, Ryan, and if anyone else hasn't ever seen it, they're going to hate this probably as well. One of the opening scenes is literally the same woman from Jaws, is part of, it's set in the 40s obviously because it's during World War II, but it's the same woman, same actress, is playing a polar bear club member. So she goes skinny dipping in the ocean, and the Jaws theme starts playing. So this is like within 3 or 4 years of Spielberg's own film, and he's already parodying it himself, which is kind of weird. And a submarine appears, and she gets lifted. It's not the shark fin; it ends up being a submarine's telescope thing, and it lifts her off the thing, and she's completely naked, but you can't see anything obviously because it's a PG-13 comedy, but and she's lifted out of the water as the submarine rises. And I'm just like, I don't remember this at all. I know I've seen this movie a long time ago, but I have no recollection. I must have seen it when I was way younger. I have no recollection of this whatsoever. But I'm just aghast at the fact that Spielberg could think that, like, within 3 to 4 years of him making, like, the biggest movie out at the time of pre-Star Wars anyway, that it was... Even that alone was okay to make. He's making a joke about his own film. Like, it's so weird. I don't know how else to describe it. It's such a surreal, weird thing. Like, why would you do that? Let alone everything else that's in that movie.
And that's even, like, before your sort of parody movies started coming out as well, like your Airplanes and your Top Gun. Not Top Guns.
I think Airplane was about the same time. It was either the same year or the year before. I can't remember this. I can't remember which year. Someone's going to correct me on that. 1941. I think it's 78 or 79. So it was about the same time as Airplane. And Airplane obviously has that first gag with the plane fin, and but it's just wow. Like, yeah, it's weird. It's very, very odd. I don't know what else to say. It's definitely a thing of its time. I think it's probably easy to say. A thing of its time, and something that obviously Spielberg's probably somewhat regretful for.
He's probably just blocked it out. Like someone goes up to him with like a DVD of it to sign it. And he goes, "No,
I think
not mine."
I think he's made up for it with Schindler's List. And,
for sure.
And the stuff he's done, kind of outside of even the cinema, to do with the history of war. I think, and with Medal of Honor as well. The video game series came from the same stuff going into Saving Private Ryan, and obviously Band of Brothers and Pacific. Sorry, I think he's pretty well and truly made up for it.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I don't think he needs to apologise anymore. I think that's pretty much it. We were discussing the idea of doing a little thing at the end of each episode, and we haven't really. Well, we kind of only just before we started recording thought of something, so we thought we might discuss a little bit more. You were thinking about a game where we pull an actor or actress out of a hat and try and name as many was it films or roles?
Just
whatever,
whatever you
films
or TV shows.
TV shows.
You get many actors that cross over these days,
and see who can get the better running total of this in a minute. You were saying, sorry, I didn't even say that. In a minute. I think that's quite clever. I think it's perhaps slightly easier than trying to do like 6 Degrees of Separation or the Kevin Bacon
number, yeah.
The Bacon number, yeah. Which has obviously been done. But I think that's pretty funny. I wanted to ask you one last thing because you brought this up and I want to have this debate with you. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I may.
Yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about. You were talking about Transformers the other day.
Uh-huh.
And we had this massive debate, and I really want to bring this up because I thought it was really hilarious. So you're adamant that not only is Megatron such a weird thing to transform into his gun,
yeah,
and it's out of proportion,
yeah,
that the trigger is something. What do you reckon the trigger is?
The trigger is his penis. There's no easy way to say it. Like, if you've got the toy, like you don't think of it when you watch the cartoon, but if you get the toy, the trigger is his penis when you transform him.
Now, see, my discussion about this is that I think that Transformers are non-sexualized. And while there are male and female Transformers, they don't reproduce. So therefore, he doesn't really have a penis, and it's just a trigger. And the trigger just happens to sit at penis height. That's my take on it. I'm thinking it the other way around. I'm thinking that in the gun form, it's a trigger, and when he transforms into the robot form, the trigger just happens to sit between his legs. That's my take.
I can give you that.
Yeah, I think it's a fair call. I can see where you're going, but because there's no sexual connotations with Transformers as far as I'm aware, unless you're gonna show me some sort of shock internet site with like Transformers porn or something.
I'm sure it exists, but I'm not.
What's that rule? The Rule 31 or Rule 36 or whatever it is. That if it exists, there must be porn of it. Yeah. I hate to think that there's someone out there who's like, oh yeah, I totally know there's Transformers porn. Well, that's weird. Yeah. Oh my god.
Going down a rabbit hole now.
Yeah, it is going down a rabbit hole.
You've got like your RC as well. Like, as far as G1 goes, it's the only female Transformer I can think of. I think there's a couple more, but it's probably the main one.
It's interesting. It started that discussion with your girlfriend as well about gender. Was it gender conformity in Transformers? A debate I never expected to have. But I thought was absolutely hilarious. I just thought this was well timely after you guys had seen Bumblebee.
Yeah.
Because there's female Transformers in that movie more than perhaps. Is there more than that? No, there's been more in the previous Michael Bay films. There's been 3 or 4 in them, but they're very rare. There's not a common thing.
Yeah, because I think one of them there was like RC was like the 3 bikes.
That's right.
That could transform into like a combiner or something.
Yeah, it was RC and two others. Yeah, I remember.
But and then in this one you had the one of the triple changes in this, and then of course you see RC on Cybertron at the start.
That's right. Yeah, which was like, oh my god, it's RC. Oh my god, it's blah blah blah. You were doing the same thing. You were like, oh, it's oh my god, it's blah blah. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I think, aside from doing this thing, I think we should always have some sort of ridiculous debate at the end, because I think this idea of a Transformer trigger penis is hilarious. So I think every time we should come up with something to discuss that's kind of a little bit weird, because I think that's quite funny that you just randomly blurted that out too. Like,
I think we got into the discussion of it, and it just came out somehow.
Yeah, we were just talking about the Transformers size, because we were talking about the fact that they usually transform into something of an equivalent near size. And you were like, no, but Megatron turns into a gun. I said, yeah, but he's a bigger gun. He said, why is he a gun? No, why? Because I said, why are they vehicles on Cybertron? Because they don't have vehicles, and they don't have the shape of a vehicle, but they still have vehicles. Because, it was because of Soundwave.
Yeah,
Soundwave still has tapes, even though it's on Cybertron, and he's not technically a stereo yet, because he hasn't scanned one. So why does he have a compartment with tapes in it? Yeah. But that's always bugged me even since the cartoons, because it was the same in the cartoons too. And that's another one that changes size. When he transforms, he
shrinks down too, yeah.
I don't quite understand how that works. But anyway, and then you were like, "There's no gun." But why is he a gun? There's no guns. I was like, "Yes, there's guns because Optimus Prime has that big black cannon gun of his, and it's in the Bumblebee movie as well." Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But yeah, it is true. Why do they transform into? Why does he transform to a gun? It is very weird. It doesn't.
It could be many vehicles, but yet he changes into a gun. Why?
And the toy one, the robot's smaller and the gun is bigger.
Yeah.
Just to throw that one in there too, like it's back to front, because it's a gun that's sized for a gun that a kid could hold.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you get, I think when the original toys came out, I think you get one of the Decepticons would come with a small Megatron that he could hold.
That's right. I remember that too. Yes, yeah, you're right. I
think it was like Starscream or Soundwave or something. It was come with a mini Megatron.
And then in the face of complaints about the fact he turned into a gun, they turned him into a tank. Yeah. Which is just kind of really...
Still military hardware.
Yeah, it's not really changing things, really. It's not...
It's still a gun of sorts.
It's a weapon of some description. That's not dodging the bullet at all, really.
No pun intended. It's a soda.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. Anyway, all right, I think we'll call it there for this episode. I think it's been about an hour or so. Next time we'll probably end up talking about Glass. I think we talked about that. I think that will probably be definitely something we both go and see. Is there anything else in the next couple of weeks that you're wanting to see? Is there anything? I've got to make you sit down and watch Ready Player One. We'll talk about that next time too. I think
within the next episode, I'd say we probably would have seen Aquaman by then as well.
Yeah,
perhaps.
I might go see. I think that if there's nothing else better out next week, I think Aquaman will probably be my thing to go to. I will keep you posted in case
as well as whatever open air cinema we go to. Or Silo Park.
Or whatever, depending obviously on hours. You're working nights.
Yes. I'm currently doing midnight till 7.
Woohoo! So that's exciting. So that's going to probably impact on that a bit. It'll have to be evenings.
Yeah.
Is it a whole 7 days? Yeah. Good times.
All right. I enjoy it.
We'll work it out. All right. Well, that's it from me.
That's it from me as well.
But if you've got any comments or complaints, or I'm going to post this on. I haven't even told you this. I'm going to post these on Facebook, and I'm going to find a podcasting kind of thing, and then it'll go on iTunes and all that sort of stuff. So there'll be a Facebook page, and I don't really do Twitter. Do you do Twitter?
No, I don't. I think I did back in the day, but I haven't done it for like a decade.
Maybe I should try and set up a Twitter and actually learn how to use it properly for this. And people can message and email, and we can talk. Again, finally, just the focus. We talked a lot about mainstream stuff this kind of podcast, just because simply it was a lot of things to talk about for the coming year and what we've seen being the first episode, and it's a work in progress. But we'll try and focus a little bit more on stuff that's happening locally in the industry and local movies as well, because obviously that kind of makes a big difference to us just talking about the same old stuff that probably lots of other people are talking about. So this kind of won't be exactly the same as always, but hopefully we'll kind of progress. Anyway, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.